Hi you guys, and welcome back. I decided today to go ahead and do a little bit more to this car. After I drive it for a while, I decided to see if I can make it run a little bit better, because it does run really good right now. And when you first start it in the morning, starts right up, choke works, it comes off a choke, and then I notice that it's a little bit lean. And this is kind of typical with your Volkswagen. A lot of them will have different moods. They'll like being cold, some don't. And on these late models, it's a little more difficult to do. We'll talk about a little bit about tuning these carburetors. I am no expert at these carbs. I'll tell you what, typically what I have on my dual port engines is I'll have a dual two-barrel carburetor. And a two-barrel carburetor is going to have a dead spot right after you warm it up, and then as it totally gets to total warm up, when it's nice and warm and hot, that goes away. And that is normal for most Volkswagens. All right, so a lot of guys will say, well, I have a dead spot, I want to get a vacuum advanced distributor to get rid of it. It's like, okay, that's like a normal thing. All right, and I've run this thing with a vacuum advance and also with this 009, and it runs exactly the same. It does not change it at all. So in the past, we've been able to get these to run with a 009 or with a vacuum advance and run correctly, but it does take a little bit of work. So we're kind of going to go over tuning these carburetors and also tuning the early ones. So I'm going to kind of make both in the same video here, and how you do it. It's done differently on this carburetor. Like I said, I'm not really every dual part engine I have had in the past has had a two barrel. I've never really been tuning these, but we had a guy at our shop who used to do it. He did them. He was so good at it that I never had to touch him, because he would just come over and be done. It was always, he'd play around with them and get it running great in no time at all. And he was one of those guys that did it so quickly I could never learn from him. I could just watch him. He'd be done in seconds. So I've got one off the car, and we're just kind of going to go over the tuning process so you guys can see that it's definitely different than the earlier carburetors. So I'm going to start with an earlier carburetor so you can see that there is a definite difference. So your earlier carburetor had the main jet behind here. You could just take this off, and usually it was inside this nut or bolt or whatever you want to call it. There's a main jet facing this direction, and you could take that out and change it. On your single ports, all my single ports, I used to have stock carburetors on, so I'm used to tuning these, no problem. And they had a couple different options on these as well, so we'll kind of go into that as well. So your typical, this is a 30 pick 1 or 28 PICT, had the same setup. All right, so what you do is you go ahead and fire it up, and your choke was, your idle adjustment for your choke was done, and your regular idle adjustment was all done with one screw right here. So this was your idle. To set your idle, this is what you'd set. You make sure it was down all the steps to the bottom, warmed up, completely warmed up, and you get it to that flat spot right there. Let's look. You get it to that flat spot. If it was on any of these little teeth, that's not fully warmed up, or the choke or the choke is not working correctly. So you get it to that nice little flat spot right there, and that's where you'd set your idle. All right. Now this had, okay, there's a fuel screw and an air screw, and I believe the late models had an air screw, not a fuel screw. So on motorcycles, if you ever know about that, motorcycles have some have a fuel screw and some have an air screw, and you have to know which one it is. So on these, I believe it's a fuel screw, and what you do is you turn this in. So while the engine's running, you turn this in until it starts to stumble a little bit, then you back it off until it doesn't, and I usually would go another quarter turn open. All right, on these carburetors. So these are done completely different than your later model. So that's kind of how it was done. You turn this one in, and that's how almost every carburetor on the face of the earth, you know, old Chevys and stuff like that, Fords, my old 6-cylinder Nova had the same setup. You turn this in, turn the fuel screw in until it would start to stumble, and then back it out until it didn't. And if it didn't adjust correctly, well, this one here has some, this doesn't belong here. This just like a random junk carburetor from the pile. This should have a idle jet right here. Okay, and it looks, this one has an idle jet. Even though it's a late model carburetor, the idle jet looks like this. You can see right there, that's what an idle jet looks like. And if it didn't adjust correctly on the early ones, then you would probably have an issue with your idle jet being too lean or too rich, and you'd have to just take it out and try going either direction until you got figured out what it was, and then after that you'd be able to adjust your idle. Usually what I would do is take this thing and crack it loose, and if it started to run better, then it told me it was too lean. Okay, so crack it loose a little bit, and kind of find out, okay, yeah, it's running better when it's loose, so that's telling me I'm letting a little extra fuel in. It's definitely the wrong, probably too lean of an idle jet. Let me put a richer one in, and that's when you use your jet sizing tool, which you need one of these. You don't just go by what's on the jet, you have to measure it. So you take one of these and all these little ends, you put it in your jet and find out what it is that's in there. These all are numbered, you know, 55, 60, 65, 70, all the way on down to like 40. And then you use this to check your main jet as well. So I cannot tell you what an average main jet is on every engine. I don't know. It's going to be different on every one. So yeah, you got to figure that out on your own. I mean, single ports somewhere in between. I mean, I've seen as little as a 122 on up to a 130 in that area typically is where they are. So that kind of gives you a roundabout number. 122 is really lean. That would be like something with a really big cam in it, and you're trying to overcome that extra air and fuel mixture from the cam, and you know, and it's doesn't have enough compression, something weird like that. And then 130 is kind of 127, 130, somewhere in there. It depends also on the kind of fuel you're getting. If you're using ethanol based fuels, it's going to be richer you're going to need. So again, there's a gazillion different combinations, and you're going to have to kind of figure that main jet on your own. And I'm going to explain to you later in this video how that I do that. So if you have an early engine, that's how the adjustment's done. Now you can have a 30. So this is a 30, I believe. Well, this one here's no, this is 34. So I have a 30. So your 30 and on up, your 30 PICT 3, PICT 3.4. There's a whole bunch of different ones that looks like this. This is how they work, and they work just like the late models. So you have a idle bypass right here. There is some difference between these and the late ones, all right? The choke stuff is all different. So this would need to be so that this thing is not touching, okay? Let me get you guys focused in here. This part, when it's at idle, this part should not be touching this, okay? It should have a space in there, all right? Because the spring holds it back, right? And then you adjust your idle with this thing here. This is an air bypass. So you adjust your idle with this. But this cannot be touching that. If it's touching that, then it's going to mess with this, okay? And it's going to give you problems. So this cannot be touching, and then you adjust your idle with the big screw down here, okay? So after you adjust your idle, they say to adjust it at, like, say 900. It's easier to do with a tack, but you can do it with a good ear as well. So you adjust your idle about, say, 900. It doesn't need to be 900, but just whatever, you can start there. And then what you'll do is you'll take your long screwdriver. This one here is my snap-on long screwdriver. I use this for General Motors typically, but it fits right nicely inside this one. So then this one here, normally I'll start out about 4 turns open. Okay, if you don't have any setting, open this up about 4 turns, maybe 5. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll open this up little by little, go like a quarter turn at a time, and listen to the engine. If it goes up in RPMs, up in RPMs, up in RPMs, up in RPMs, you can do a little bit and then just kind of wait and see the RPMs go up a little more. Let's turn it a little bit, wait for the RPMs to go up a little more, turn it a little bit, and wait for the RPMs to go up a little more until it's at the highest point. So then all of a sudden you'll feel it start to drop a little bit. When the engine RPMs start to drop a little bit, then bring it back in. You find that highest point, okay, with this carburetor. This is, I believe, an air screw, okay? You go to the highest point, and then what I do is I'll open it up just a little bit more, another quarter turn. So once I find the highest point, open it up a quarter turn more, all right? And that should be an adequate mixture. Now, this is where you run into issues on this. If it's not adjusting, okay, if it's not adjusting and it's not getting right, you might have, now this is the more complicated of the two carburetors, you have 2 different idle jets, okay? Now, I don't know, I can't remember, like I said, I'm not an expert on these carburetors, but one of these 2 is the idle and one's the intermediate. I believe the one that goes in straight is the idle, if I recall correctly, and you would need to replace your idle jet. Typically these are like a 50, 55, somewhere in there. And if you adjust it and it doesn't, and it seems too lean, then you do the same thing. I will loosen this up and kind of listen to it and see if it gets better or worse. That tells me if I'm rich or lean. And then the other one is just off of idle. So as you raise your RPMs a little bit, this one can be lean or rich and then cause issues as well, okay? And need to be changed and updated. And some people just say don't ever mess with that one, but if you really want your engine to run better, you're gonna have to play around with this stuff a little bit, okay? So like my 40 horse, that sucker would start up and idle on whatever, on the idle circuit, and run perfect when it was cold. As it would warm up, it run perfect. As it got hot, it ran perfect. So that's possible to get it to do that with this setup. A lot of guys don't like these carburetors with the 2 jets because it's harder to adjust, okay? So the PICT 30 PICT 3.4, that's basically how they work. Now you get on up in years to the 30 PICT 34, to the dual port, and they have a couple options. They have ones that are like this one, and I don't know which number they are. I don't recall that stuff. Like I said, I'm not the expert on this, but maybe this will help you find your groundwork so you can kind of figure it out. The guys with the 34s, they don't like this setup right here at all. Guys will tell you don't, just throw that carburetor away, don't use it. That's up to you. I've gotten them to work. It just takes a bit more work to do. But they like this one with the 1 jet in the side. Okay, this is your idle jet. And then your main jet on these is you take this screw all the way out and it's all the way down inside. Okay, so that's the typical late model one, the jet's all the way at the bottom. It's really hard to fish it out. Almost every time I have to take the carburetor off to get it out and to put the new one in. Some of them you'll have to hold the jet on the end of your screwdriver and then hold the carburetor sideways and put the jet in while the carburetor's off the car. I have this fancy little points tool that I use. This is a points screwdriver, and you can turn it like this and it locks in, and I can kind of get the jet to stay on this thing most of the time. The Mexican bow car carburetors, no, the jet's too small. I can't do that with this tool. I'll have to take it off and do like you guys are going to have to do. Put the jet on the end of this thing and screw it in the carburetor, holding it sideways like so. And put that jet in. Or sometimes you got to take the whole top off, just the way it goes, guys. So that's kind of how you adjust it. If I did it while the engine's running, you would not be able to hear me. That's why I'm explaining it without the engine running. All right, so again, if you're trying to adjust one of these like this one, if you're adjusting this carburetor like this one, you're going to have it run very lean, because you're going to start pulling this out till it levels out, and it never really kind of levels out. You got to keep going until it's at the highest point. And from what I understand, I believe that's a air screw, not a fuel screw. I really don't know, but like I said, I'm not, these carburetors, never ran these. I always had 2 barrels. So, and the old 2 barrels that I ran, the Holly Weber, or the Progressive, as people call it, or the Weber 2 barrel 3838, all adjust the same as this one. All right, as the early carburetor. This is a 28, 30 PICT 1. A lot of guys like to run the 30 PICT 1 because it's very simple and because it doesn't have this whole system, but these do work well when they're working right. Again, when you're adjusting this carburetor, this one again has, this thing needs to be, when it's fully at idle, this screw right here cannot be touching. There has to be a little tiny bit of space. You see how this thing moves real easily? It's because there's a little tiny bit of space in there between this arm and that piece, okay? Or it will not adjust here. If it's sticking out a little bit, it'll run rough because it's not running on the idle circuit, which is running on this bypass right here. It's trying to run on the intermediate, so you have to have this all the way to where, turn it in till it's touching, turn it out a couple of turns until it's not. And that's where I kind of just push on it a little bit. I can see that it's not. You'll see some of the guys say you can turn it in another quarter turn after it's all the way out, whatever, I don't know. I just make sure it's not touching. Okay, back to the running problem. So now how do you know if it's too lean or too rich? Backyard method. You know, a lot of guys today are getting something called a wideband, welding it in the exhaust. Really, that's the best thing to do. It's a little more complicated for you DIY guys, so we're not going to get into that in this video. A lot of times I'll weld a bung in the exhaust, and I have a oxygen sensor that I'll put in my exhaust, and I'll put that in the car. I have that all wired up and drive it. But a lot of times you don't have time for that. Like this car, I really don't have that much time to do all that. So we're going to do it the backyard method. And so anyway, what's happening right now? So you need to know what size jet is in your carburetor. That's why you have to have the jet sizing tool, because you're going to pull that out. It'll say 127. You'll put it on the thing. Hey, wait, they bored that one out to a 135. So the only way you're going to ever know is to have the jet sizing tool. All right, you have to use that, and they're not cheap to buy, so you have to have one of those. So I've checked the main jet in this one. It is 127. Okay, it is a 127. Okay, and that's probably too lean. So I talked to a couple of my friends that do work on these late models. And one of my friends that I've known for like, I don't know, 40 years, he says 140. I'm like, wow. He says 140 or 145 is what he's running. So if you want to try that, go for it. I could not get a 140 for this engine. He says for a 1600 dual port with these carburetors on them, he's running 140s in them with a 009. And he says they end up running pretty good with that. But again, I could not get a 140, so I'm going to go for the 137 and see if it improves. What's happening with it right now, and how you know that it's lean or rich or whatever, usually kind of give you an idea. If it runs really good when it's cold, it's probably rich. Because what does your carburetor do? It has a choke to help it run rich when it's cold. And that helps the engine run better when it's cold. And if it runs like crap when it's hot, then it might be rich, okay? It's not running as good when it's hot, and it's running better when it's cold. It's probably rich, okay, because of those reasons. An engine likes choke, it likes rich when it's cold. What's happening with this one is right when the choke turns off, it's running lean. And I know that because it's got a dead spot, and it just the way you drive it, it kind of runs crappy when it's cold. After it warms up to really, really warm, I mean, it has to be super hot. I have to drive it for like 30 minutes on the freeway. After that, it runs better, quite a bit better, almost good, okay? So that's telling me that the carburetor is probably lean. So let's put a 137 in this thing, because I have a 137 and a half or 137, because that's what I could get, and see if it runs better. And then maybe Chip is right on the 140 to 145. I don't know, that's a lot of jet to me. Most of the guys were telling me 135, but he says 140. But he's up in the high desert. The air's a little thinner up there. You know, how does that factor in? I don't know. So anyway, let's go with the 137. I'm just going to change it out, kind of show you how to do that, and then we'll go from there. All right, guys, let's take the carburetor off. This is why you want the proper distributor on this car, because you take your distributor cap off. I've already loosened the throttle cable, which is one of the things that takes the most amount of time. And then you just go ahead and with your box end of your wrench, pull the carburetor off, because we have to pull the main jet out of the bottom. The only way we're going to get it out is with the carburetor off. It's really not hard to do. Reach, if you notice, see my hand going behind here. This is how you remove the carburetor. Real easy. Put your hand back there, get your finger on it, and then just take this guy off. We can leave the fuel line on. Usually I'll do that, and then I'll pull the wires. Now this one here, the fuel shutoff. Another thing, I had this happen on this carburetor, is this fuel shutoff, if it's not working properly, boy, will it give you all kinds of problems. So what guys will do is they'll take this out and they'll cut the end of it off so that the fuel shutoff doesn't work, and just remove the wire. This one seems to be working perfectly, so I'm not going to do that. I like the fuel shutoff. What does the fuel shutoff do? If you noticed your car, after you turn the engine off, it starts dieseling. This is what did that. This stops that dieseling from happening. So it shuts all the fuel off so it can't diesel. All right, that's what that valve does. So we got a short wire there. We can leave this one on. Let's see if I can get you guys, make sure you guys are in frame. I know you're falling out. Be patient. Yeah, you're back in. Okay. So we're going to remove this bolt. This is a car carburetor. I guess these are okay. I mean, it does not have a, over on this side, it does not have a idle jet. So these were made solely, I don't know how they work exactly, but it's solely based on that adjustment. So it's kind of weird. I don't know. I don't know. So let's take off this one. Like I said, I'm not familiar with these carburetors very well. And take this off. Get our fuel, dump it out. Ew. All over the paint. Oh my God, it's not very good for the paint. How many times you spill paint in your car? You spill gas in your car when you fill it up with gas. I mean, gas in your paint when you fill it up. It's fine. Now, if we're lucky, which I don't know if I will be, I'll be able to get this jet out without pulling the top of the carburetor off. Sometimes you just got to do it. There's no way to do it. So get it loose. On camera, I'm sure I'll drop this jet where I can't get it out of here. Ooh, there it is. It came out. It went right over here. And these ones are tiny. This one's tiny, tiny little thing. Look how small that is. It's the Bocar ones are really small. I mean, that's just tiny. I'll show you the new one. I don't know if the threads are the same. That's what I don't know. So if this doesn't work, I'm just going to have to, you know, I could bore the jet out, but, you know, then if I go too far, then I'm screwed. I can't go back, right? So let's see what we got here. Well, it looks like we're going to have a little bit of a fail here, but if you can see here, look how tiny this is the Bocar jet, and this is the Solex. It's funny, they list them as the same, and I thought maybe the threads are the same, but let's look here a little closer. And you can see there is no chance that is going to be the same. No chance. So we're just going to have to leave it the way it is. And it really doesn't run that bad. It's actually running pretty good, and it doesn't run hot at all. So it's not really that bad, but it could be better. It's just I was going to try and do that for you guys, but obviously we cannot get that jet. I don't know if they're available somewhere, but they did not have it at CarCraft, so. Or they may have had it, but they didn't know what it was. And I'd have to take this one down. I didn't want to have this car disabled. In fact, I was driving it at the time. And I didn't want to take that down. But it's going to show you guys, I think if I richened this thing up, it would run way better. But again, we're not going to be able to do it today. But at least you guys have learned how to adjust the carburetor and how the process goes on, so you can learn how to do your own stuff at some point. So anyway, that little tiny jet, I don't have any of these. Or if I have any Mikunis or something else. They're all in metric size. You know, it's see 1.275 millimeters. Okay, and this one's 1.375 millimeters. Okay, that's what the 125 and 135s, all that is. It's by millimeter, and same as the Mikuni carburetors and all the others. So maybe they're the same. I don't know. Maybe I'll get lucky. I'll take a look, and I have some of those for motorcycles, and you never know. All right, guys, no luck. I pulled the Kian ones, and they look like the Kian actually look like they might interchange with Solex. Anybody ever tried it? I looked at the size of them, and the threads look the same. I put the threads on top of the threads, and they seem to be the same, and they're a little bit smaller than the Solex, but I wonder if they would work. Anybody ever tried it? Comment below. I don't know, but this Bocar is definitely just too small, so I got to put this jet back in. So what I'll do is I'll put the jet on the end of my screwdriver like that, okay? And then what I'll do is I'll hold the carburetor upside down and put this jet in the hole. And of course, I'll never get that done on camera, so I'm just going to leave it at that. This is a little bit about tuning carburetors, and hopefully it helps you. How I do it is by, knowing what a lean engine sounds like, knowing when the rich. They sound different. Rich kind of sounds more lopey. Lean kind of sounds more crackly. You get used to the sounds of them, and you kind of know the backyard method of jetting, and you can be pretty successful at doing it. And that's basically what I do. But this one here is just, it's a little bit, more dead spot usually is lean when it's cold. And then when it gets better, when it's warm, that tells you that it's more than likely a lean issue. And that's what we're having here. But it's not that bad. It's actually totally doable the way it is. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it the way it is. And hopefully somebody else can find these. These old Bocar carburetors are actually sought after. They're pretty good. They sell for a big price, but I don't know. Again, the reasons I don't use them are not availability of parts. So anyway, I'll talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.